welcome to today's Let's Talk Baby. We have such an important topic to discuss. We are going to talk about introducing your baby to your family pet. And we have Crystal Dunn with us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. It's great. Yeah.
So Crystal is a dog behavioral consultant, and now you really focus on writing and your podcast, right?
Yeah. I've been at it for 15 years, working with families and their dogs in all kinds of capacities, mostly in home private training. And now I'm working on a podcast called Far-Fetched, which focuses on common myths and misconceptions about dogs. So it's really fun, and we are going to touch on all kinds of stuff, including a whole episode on babies and dogs. But yeah, it's really fun to do.
And I think, you know, here in Austin, it's such a big dog city. Everybody loves their dogs. It's like your children here. And so I just thought it would be a really important topic because we get this a lot in the hospital or in our prenatal classes on how to introduce your pet to your new baby. We're going to focus on cats and dogs today. I think this is really important because, as I was telling you, I've been bit twice, and it was not anything that I had evoked. However, one of them was with a new baby. And, you know, I was a stranger coming into this home when mom was distraught and teary because breastfeeding wasn't going well, and then here I come in and, you know, the dog was a little hyper and then ended up biting me, and it was a shock to that mom because the dog had never bit before.
Yeah. And they say a dog is never a biter until they are, you know, which is important to remember because every dog possesses the propensity to bite, no matter how docile or friendly they are. They all come with teeth, and they're all can bite you if they're pushed to their breaking point. So, and for some dogs, that's a much lower breaking point than others, you know, so you have to really consider the personality of the dog, and sometimes you don't know going in, like in your case.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And I think cats, too, are important to talk upon as well because, you know, I knew a very, very hostile cat that, you know,
I had one for a while,
Yeah, so, which was so shocking. I'd never seen a cat that hostile before.
Yeah.
Just how to keep your pet safe and how to keep your family safe, especially during this transition time because it's a big transition time.
Right, it is.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. Babies coming in, even just from the point you get pregnant, like it's just a whole world of new things surrounding you, and it's very overwhelming, and you know, and I think it's important to remember that stress definitely does carry on to your family pet. You know, they're going to feel a lot of that because they're typically very bonded with you already. So, you know, they'll absorb some of that too, and then you've got all the new sights and smells coming in even before the baby arrives, and then you have the baby. So there's multiple stages, and I always like to think of dogs and babies in those stages. You know, you've got pre-baby, you know, you've even got pre-baby before you're pregnant where you're thinking about it, but you want to adopt a dog and you want to make sure you get the right dog. And then, you know, you've got pregnancy and making sure that your dog is going to acclimate to the new baby, and then you've got a newborn and then a toddler. Right. Which is really kind of the major leagues of like incorporating children and dogs as toddler stage.
Yes. Let's start with pregnancy. How can we make the transition of a new baby easier for our pets?
So there's a number of things that you can do, and there's some really great books on this too, and I highly recommend, you know, picking one up. We can certainly provide that list to you guys of different resources that people can read. But in short, there's a number of really simple things that you can do to prepare your dog. Number one, as you acquire new baby things, set them up. Put them out in your house so that your dog acclimates to new pieces of furniture before they have to acclimate also to a new baby and all their new sounds and smells. All these things move, and that can really freak out a lot of dogs. They smell different too. It's also your opportunity to teach healthy boundaries around those objects before there's a baby in them. So teaching your dog to go around is as simple as luring them around things and saying, around, with a treat. And then reward once they've gone around. You can even teach your dog to go around a blanket and treat them for that as well. So they kind of learn to be a little bit more aware of the objects in your house and how to avoid them. Other things that you can do are, of course, introduce new smells that your dog's going to experience, like the lotion, the baby wash, things like that. So that, again, it's just less new when the baby comes in.
Kind of preparing them in steps.
Yeah, exactly. And to your point earlier, when your baby is born, then you can bring home something that smells like your baby with all those things on it. And your dog can smell all those familiar smells and the new baby smell, and they can be like, oh, okay, I get it now.
Right.
There's a bonus smell here, then baby arrives.
Right. So we actually, in the hospital, we do give the little baby hats to the families beforehand, so that they could take it home before the baby gets home, and the dog can smell and kind of get ready for the baby's arrival. One of the other things that I had heard was about introducing the noises of a baby, like crying or cooing or laughing. By playing it, we have YouTube now.
YouTube's great. Use YouTube to desensitize your dog to all the weird baby sounds, and turn on your machines and mechanisms too, and play the songs and everything as well, so that those things are making their noise. That's definitely a great tip as well. I'll add to, do your training before baby arrives. If you're going to change the way that your dog has access to rooms in your house, say you don't want them in your nursery, or that's totally fair. Setting good boundaries for your dog is really important in general, but especially when you have a baby. But do that before baby arrives, because you don't want your dog meeting new baby and then all of a sudden being told that he no longer sleeps on the bed, and he no longer gets on the couch, and he's no longer allowed in that nursery room. That all gets paired with the baby, so that association gets built, and it's not a positive one. But if you do that stuff beforehand, then you have a dog that already is used to those boundaries, and there's no associating it with the baby. The baby comes in separate. So
that's a good tip. What about, can you really train a cat?
You can. Mostly. Sometimes. Some cats are more trainable than others, honestly. And it's similar to dogs in that, like, the more food motivated a cat is, the easier they are to train. And this is true for dogs as well. But with that said, you can still teach healthy boundaries to kitty cats. You can teach them to stay off your countertops. You can teach them to not claw on your furniture and not scale your legs. Oftentimes, it's done through just a lot of repetition and removal. But you can also use some deterrents and everything too. And I always say that with the caveat that be really careful about how you use deterrents, like squirt bottles or like foil on furniture and stuff. Those are common things that are recommended on the internet to deter an animal from like jumping up on something, or you can punish a cat by squirting them with water. Those things can work for you, but they can also do potential damage depending on what's happening in that environment. That animal is going to associate things with what's happening around them at the same time. So if you squirt a cat for crawling into your crib, when the baby's in there, that association can build with the baby as well. So be really careful with anything aversive that you use. You're usually better off just repeating a lot and being really strict. Don't make exceptions to your rules and be consistent. And most of the time, an animal's going to compromise with you, especially if you remove them from the counter and then give them a treat for being on the floor.
So positive reinforcement instead of negative reinforcement.
Yeah, and I'm not saying negative reinforcement doesn't have its place, because it does. There are certain situations where you can't get around it. But be careful and always try to coach and teach first before you ever introduce anything negative, because you just confuse animals when you try to punish them out of behaviors when they haven't been taught a substitute behavior to take that place. So think about what you want instead and try to facilitate that and then reward it. And then you're going to have a much better result and a much happier animal who understands their world a lot better.
Yeah. And like you said, doing it way before baby comes and getting the crib up, getting the nursery ready, and limiting access before baby even comes, so that when baby does come, it's something they've already learned. Yeah,
and it doesn't all happen all at once for you either, which is really important, because you won't have time. Now when the baby comes, there's just no time at first, and
you barely have enough time to eat and sleep.
And you've kind of gone through your due diligence and explaining to your dog or your cat kind of what's coming, and is clearer terms as you can. And so they're a lot more likely to cope with that change as well. And the things that get sacrificed as a result of it, because they understand a little bit more what's happening in their home. Dogs and cats, but especially dogs, are very family-oriented animals. They aren't the pack animals we think they are. They are very much associated with parents and siblings, and so they understand a lot more dynamics about our families than we often give them credit for. Taking the time to really kind of try to explain to them through smells and sights and just preparation goes a long way to make sure that when you get to the point with new baby and everything's very hectic, your dog understands what's happening, you know, on some level.
On some level,
Yeah.
right. But that preparation is just super key.
Yeah.
And then how about, okay, so now we've prepared through our pregnancy, we've gotten our animal ready, and now here comes baby with the different smells and the different sounds, and then the lack of attention that the new parents have for the animal that was their world, you know, and now here comes their baby who's now their world, you know.
Right,
so
yeah.
how can you foster good habits and behaviors there?
You have quite a few options. That kind of brings me to toys too, which also can go into your preparation stage. But one of my favorite tricks for teaching a dog to differentiate between baby toys and dog toys is interacting with your dog a lot with their toys, but before that, mist them with a little bit of like vanilla scented water first. So that
Mist the dog or the toy?
The toy.
Oh.
Yeah, so that they smell like vanilla. Dogs generally like the smell of vanilla. And yeah, me too. And it doesn't take much, just a couple drops in a squirt bottle, and you just mist their toys with it, and then interact with them a bunch before baby comes, so that they become very bonded with their things. And then you can teach them a command like leave it with your baby toys that don't smell like vanilla, and they'll be better at differentiating between what's theirs and what's baby's. And leave it's a great command to have anyway, just in general, but especially when it comes to babies and kids, because it teaches your dog that there are just things in this world that are not theirs. And as a scavenger, they're used to like finding stuff and playing mine. So that's a great one. But that one also feeds into post-baby, and being able to redirect your dog to their toys and stuff when they need something to entertain themselves and can't necessarily interact. So if you lay that groundwork first, they're more likely to take their toys off and play on their own when you're not available, because they'll be more bonded to their toys. So that's one great tip. And then good interactive toys are really great to provide during those early stages of newborn baby as well. Things that they can chew on, you know, Kong wobblers and stuff that are kind of brain games that they have to figure out how to get food out of. Those kinds of things can go a long way. And then my other tip is, if you don't have time to walk your dog when you have a newborn, again, totally understandable. I was not walking my dog every day after I had a newborn. And I had 3 dogs that were not acclimated to children. So, but a great tip is just to set 2 to 5 minutes aside just to work with them. Just one-on-one, take a little bit of time, have somebody hold the baby for 5 minutes so that you can give your dog something that gets their brain going. Because that little bit of interaction and that little connection can keep them going for a long ways. And in fact, if you can't walk them for more than 5-10 minutes, you can incorporate training into your walks, and you'll get a lot more out of your walks as well. So your dog will be a lot more tired from a lot less time out. So it can't hold you forever, but it's certainly going to help you get through the hard days. And then, of course, there's dog walkers and stuff as well, if you need to bring somebody in to really help you out, especially if you have a high energy dog that really needs that.
I think family and friends too, some of the things that we talk about in our other shows is, you know, accepting help from family and friends who come to visit, and also having a list so that you're not on the spot having to think of what would be helpful for them to do. So maybe on your list you put take the dog out for a walk, or you know, play with the kitty cat for a while.
A lot of people have those meal calendars where they put things, so I wonder if you can integrate some dog walks onto those meal calendars as well for your friends and family to come over and help you out.
Because we all want to help when there's a new baby, and so that could be a really great way, because that's probably something you're not even thinking about when you're prepping your list of things to do, that, oh yeah, my dog needs to go for a walk. So having somebody to do that for you could be just a really great way that you could get some rest. You don't have to go and walk the dog,
Right.
but your dog still gets the energy, the exercise and energy out that they need.
Right, absolutely. And I also say too, like, perspective is a really important thing to consider after you have a baby. I felt very bogged down for the first couple of weeks after I had my daughter, but I realized that I was making everything kind of into a chore. And as I adjusted to that new lifestyle, I started looking forward to doing simple things like dishes, because it didn't involve having a person attached to me.
Yeah.
And it didn't involve sitting on my couch. And I felt like that's all I was doing at first. So I started looking forward to doing the dishes. And one thing that can kind of do for you is eventually that turned into, for me, as soon as I got her laid down at night, I was like, oh, now I can get outside. I can take my dog for a walk. And it became this escape for me as well, where we could get outside and just be on our own for just a couple minutes. Right. Of course, that helps if you have a partner. You know, but even just getting the baby to go to sleep in the stroller and getting outside and getting some fresh air can really help keep you sane, even if you really don't want to. Right. You know,
and it's good for you, and it's good for the baby to get out too, absolutely. And it's good for your pet.
Yes.
You know, so it's working on all facets there. So it's helping all of y'all. So
and those walks keep your dog, and the playtime for kitties keeps them sane and keeps them a lot less likely to have behavior problems that will be a lot more troublesome and a lot more stressful if they're allowed to kind of go to the dark place. So
yeah. Well, very good. So that is our newborn period. Now, babies, you know, they start to get into their infancy period when they start to crawl and they start to stand up and walk, that type of thing, which could be a little weird for the dogs.
Chaos. Yeah, because like chaos.
Yes. And so how can you keep those little babies safe and the pet safe, because they like to pull up on the dogs or pull the kitty's tail?
Yeah, this is the stage that most people are really thinking about when they're thinking about integrating the dog and the baby together. The good news is your baby comes in as a teeny tiny little lump at first, and they don't do a whole lot, which is great because it gives your dog and your cat ample time to really adjust to having them in the home and realizing that they are your baby and they're part of this family that the dog is also part of. And sometimes you get some pretty surprising results from it, where you think a dog's not going to be kid friendly and they become super protective and stuff. So it can be a mixed bag of results how your dog reacts to your baby. Sometimes it's overprotective, sometimes it's fearful, sometimes, you know, but whatever it is, you know, eventually they get to this point where the child is walking around and crawling and they're grabbing and stuff. So my first pointer is no unauthorized or no unsupervised play together.
For sure.
You know, set up your baby gates, have a section of your house or apartment where you can just have you and baby, and your dog can be on the other side of the gate. That way you don't have to micromanage it 24/7. Your dog will be okay. This doesn't last forever, but you need to make sure that you keep them safe first and foremost. But then the other part of it is, of course, acclimating them together. So then when you're able to supervise them, as your baby gets older, as early as 6 months old, really, when they start crawling and they're coordinated enough to move, you can start guiding them on how to make contact with your dog. And that's your first training exercise. If your dog is okay with it, just teaching them smooth touch instead of grab. And, you know, they're still going to grab and everything. So that's your opportunity to praise the heck out of your dog and tell them how wonderful they are for tolerating that kind of contact. Letting your dog know that that's what you want from them is really, really important. Go heavy on your praise, even if it's just your dog standing there just tolerating something. But also focus a lot on your child. Humans are a lot harder to train than dogs are, honestly. So it takes us a lot more repetition because our coordination, everything doesn't develop as quickly as the dogs. And they don't necessarily understand that. So before long, you've kind of got a little drunken sailor walking around your house, and they're grabbing things and tumbling and grabbing onto dog ears and tails and stuff. And if you've graduated up to that very slowly, you're going to get a lot more forgiveness from your dog because they've been praised substantially up to that point. But yeah, lots of coaching on both sides. It's definitely a two-way street. If your dog does become irritated, you know, send them out of the room. Don't over-punish. One common mistake people make is they severely punish or yell or hit a dog who's growled or lip curled or given any kind of non-aggressive warning, which is anything that's not biting, really. These are all just warnings, and your dog has a very small list of ways that they can tell you that they're uncomfortable. The first one that they usually go to is avoidance. So they want to leave. And you should let them leave if they want to leave. Because if you let them leave, you're teaching them that it works. And that's their most peaceful way of saying, hey, I'm not interested. And that's okay. They'll become more interested as time goes by. Your baby's going to get to the point where they're carrying carrots around and stuff, and then they're going to get real interested. That's when the real magic happens. But up to that
the real
point,
bonding.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, this kid is not so bad.
Right?
It kind of tastes like peanut butter. Yeah. Or maybe your kid's not. Maybe your 2-year-old's not having peanut butter yet. But like, you know, there is a lot of bonding time that comes later on when you're through these difficult phases, and I think that's really a good thing to stay focused on while you're trying to micromanage everything through the hard stuff. But yeah, let your dog leave. If they want to leave, let them walk away. There's nothing better that you can do for a dog's behavior than to let them know that they have options. And if they do walk away, go ahead and throw them some praise too. Good dog, you know, just to let them know they've done it right. If they lip curl, halt all activity. Remove child. You know, let them know that that warning worked. They should be able to talk to you. They should be able to tell you what makes them uncomfortable. And punishing those behaviors out of a dog turns into a dog that goes from uncomfortable to bite, like that. And that's when you get your cases where people will say, like, well, he just did it out of the blue. I didn't get any warning. And in most of the time, most cases, it's because the warning's been trained out of the dog through punishment. So save your warning signals with your dog by listening to them and allowing your dog to be uncomfortable when they're uncomfortable. You can't change how they fundamentally feel about something, but you can certainly listen to them and give them options that aren't violent, which is always going to be your win.
Wonderful.
So, yeah. And it actually has this really wonderful effect on the dog in the long term, because then they come back around. Because they know they can. They can come in and out of that situation and discover more about the baby and the toddler in their own way, which allows them to get comfortable at their own pace, which then turns into a much better friendship in the long term. So,
what about if they snap at them, or you know, you see the dogs biting the diapers as the baby is walking?
Yeah, there's a lot of interactions that we tend to look at as funny. But it's important to remember that dogs don't have that kind of sense of humor. So if they're latching on to your child, that's something you want to shut down real fast. Remove dog.
So that's a remove dog.
That's a remove dog, yeah. Or separate entirely. And you can absolutely put your hands on your dog and remove them. You know, I'm a positive trainer, and I'm here to tell you, contact is still a part of it. You have to be willing to manage a situation and put your hands on your dog if you need to. Don't beat your dog, don't hit your dog, but absolutely remove them if you need to. And try not to make it super punitive. You do very little by adding more animosity into a situation that is already getting a little overheated. So, you know, just go and be like, nope, that doesn't work, and on the other side of the baby gate you go.
Do you say something like no bite, or do you just remove the dog? Or
usually we have a correction sound. Like a lot of people will use or I use uh-oh for like lower level oopses, you know, where a dog isn't necessarily being naughty, but they're not doing behavior that I like either. So it tends to help them understand what's going on there. But actions always speak louder than words. So yeah, no matter what you say, you know, make sure you're following through with your actions. And then the other thing is, of course, making sure that you're not enabling your toddler to do things like hug. You know, it's not just about smooth petting and teaching them how to smooth pet, but you can also teach them where dogs like to be pet as well to make it more enjoyable for your dog. Make your dog want to come back for more. So show them how to pet the shoulders, the chest, you know, avoid the face, the top of the head, the tail, the paws. Areas dogs don't generally like to be touched. And then dogs aren't big huggers, generally speaking. They learn to adapt to our love for hugs, so they'll often kind of, you know, enjoy that with us just because they learn it. But having a new baby or toddler come in and hug a dog is still different than you hugging your own dog. So you need to, yeah, it's just very pinning, and it can make a dog feel very stifled, especially when they know that little person doesn't have a lot of really great motor skills. So absolutely, you know, redirect those kinds of behaviors into good petting and good contact. And then there's also a cool rule called the 5-second rule, which is where you pet a dog for 5 seconds and then you stop for 5 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And you allow the dog to decide whether or not they want more. And if the dog lingers and they shove their head back into your hand, well, they're game. And if they walk away, then they've had an opportunity to walk away.
Oh,
so
nice.
Dogs,
5-second rule.
Yeah, they often feel like they're like obliged to like stay there and tolerate being pet by us. And you might be surprised at how often a dog walks away from you.
And too, this could be a nice educational activity with the child too, because you're counting to 5 with them.
That's
You know,
right. Yeah, absolutely.
And so it could be dual purpose.
Yeah.
You know, you're giving the dog time for a breather, and then you're teaching the child, you know, counting.
And you're sowing the seeds of empathy from a very young age, because you're teaching them to consider how the dog feels, which is really, really important. You know,
Yeah.
little kids, they take a while to start thinking outside of themselves. So
Yes.
it's a nice, pets are great for that. You know, teach all the empathy with pets.
Nice.
You know, guide your child on how to pet your cat. Cats are also, you know, chin, shoulders and stuff, but maybe teach them not to touch the belly if your cat doesn't like to be touched on the belly. You know where your pet likes to be touched.
Right.
So definitely go on that information and not just what I'm saying verbatim, but yeah.
I feel like cats are a little bit harder to train than dogs, at least in my experience. You know, my mom had both cats and dogs. I feel the dogs were more easily trained, and the cats just had their own personality. They were going to do what they were going to do.
Yeah, well, and when it comes to setting your house up for cats post-baby, whereas like with a dog, you might get a baby gate. Obviously, cats aren't stopped by baby gates.
No.
So I meant to mention too, add a cat tree to your house if you don't already have one, or some ledges or something mounted on your wall so that your cat can go get up high if they need to. Cats are big observers. So if they can get up somewhere high and feel safe and observe, they're going to learn a lot about what's going on, and they'll be able to figure out when they feel comfortable about coming down and interacting a little bit easier. That's much better than them having to retreat underneath the bed or something, you know, unless that's where they want to go. But most of the time they'll favor that up high safe spot because they like to know what's happening, but they don't necessarily want to be in the mix of it.
Right. That's a great tip. I like that tip a lot.
First, I would say kennel time is really great for mealtime. You know, if you have a kennel trained dog, put them in the kennel during meals so you don't have to worry about it, and so they're not allowed to practice the wrong things because you're already going to be distracted. But if you don't have a kennel trained dog, teach your dog to go lay down in a bed. You know, dogs learn to beg at the table no matter what we do. But they can also learn to go lay down on command. So if you want to be able to remove your dog from the room, that's a very simple command to kind of build up over time and teach your dog to down for 30 minutes or so in their bed. Just stay in the other room. Other directional cues can be really helpful as well when you're training. So if you're training your dog, you know, and you're expecting a baby, some things you might want to add into your training regimen are directional cues like out or go or back up. And of course off of furniture, off of me, different than laying down. And those things can really help you. Just tell your dog to go out of her room on cue if you need to. When baby comes along, that's like a mandatory one to have. So that can really help manage those environments. Inevitably, your child's going to be walking around with some food in their hands, and it's going to be a sharing situation that happens. So the only danger in this usually is, you know, or the biggest danger in this usually is that like babies often eat grapes and things that raisins and stuff that are not babies but toddlers,
right,
that are not necessarily dog safe. So make sure whatever they're cruising around with isn't going to poison your dog.
Yeah.
But also the food grabbing and stuff with dogs, that's another thing where Leave It comes in handy. You can teach your dog really good boundaries as far as like leaving food in your toddler's hands, with actual exercises. And if you're afraid that your dog is going to be resource guarding food while your toddler is walking around with it or something, again, this is a safety issue. Definitely they should not be out at the same time together when food is out. And that's probably definitely a situation where you want to hire a trainer to come in and help get you through that situation so that it's safe.
Very good. Before we wrap up, some things I do want to kind of go over, and you drowning, because we don't think that toddlers or infants could drown in doggy water bowls.
Yeah.
But they can drown in 1 inch of water.
Right.
So having those put away or up high, what would be your suggested? Cats too?
Yeah, it's challenging because depending on the animal that you have, if you have a cat, they can jump up on something usually, so you can put your water dish and your food up high and keep your young child out of that. You can also put in a very small doggy door into a garage door or something and have food and water out in the garage area where your baby can't get to. And for larger dogs, it can be a little trickier because obviously that's a big dog door to put in. But you can raise their bowls up. And there are some specialty bowls that you can get that have like a ringed lid on them, so it's a smaller hole. They're typically made for dogs that are really messy drinkers. So if you have a dog that drinks like a dumpster dog, that helps too. But it's just like a little hole in the middle of it with a lid. That can probably be a good safety addition to your home if you're afraid of your child getting into the water.
Yeah. I think a lot of times we don't think about that they could drown in just a little bit of doggy water, you know?
Yeah, and there are a lot of kids that have choked on dog food, cat food. You know, not to mention it's not really something you want them to eat.
That does not sound appetizing. No. That's awesome. Also, what would you say on when you're looking for a trainer?
So I've been training dogs for 15 years, and I can tell you that I had absolutely no idea how to really acclimate a dog and a child together until I lived it. So my number one tip is if you're going to hire a trainer, hire one that's already a parent that's been through this. I thought I knew beforehand. I didn't know. After the fact, I was like, oh man, there's so many more things I could have done for those clients over the years that were expecting babies. So that's really helpful experience that only real world experience is ever going to give a trainer, someone who's both a parent and a trainer.
That's a great tip.
Yeah, and then interview them. Talk to them, sit down and meet with a trainer, and make sure that your personality is a good fit and that this is the person you feel like you can learn from. Because not all learning styles match up. Some of us respond more to a militant style of instruction, while others really need a lot more of an empathetic ear. So it just depends on who you are and how you learn. And then, of course, you've got options. You've got trainers that will go into your home and work with you and your family specifically. And that's going to be a more expensive option, but you're probably going to get a lot out of that. Versus like classes, which have their own benefits, where your dog gets to desensitize around more distractions and work around other dogs, but the training that you get is going to be less specialized, and it's usually just going to be focused on obedience. Great foundation, but just know that if you put your dog through obedience and everything and you still have some behavior issues, it's because obedience doesn't fix everything. Sometimes it helps just having somebody come into your house and say, you know what, here's the dynamics you could work on, and this could make your life a lot easier.
Oh, wonderful. You have really taught us so much today. So thank you for that. You're helping keep babies and pets safe. So thank you for coming, and we really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right, then we will see you next time.